Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. The White House says it will very soon gain complete dominance over Iranian airspace. That's as it says the Iranian regime is weakening by the day.
Thousands of people evacuating the Middle East as the war with Iran widens, the latest in the conflict between the U.S., Israel, and Iran.
The senators reject a Democrat push to limit President Trump's military authority in Iran. Now Republicans are pushing to fund the DHS amid a 19-day stalemate.
How could the rising tensions in Iran create new risks for Beijing? We're going to break down China's deep ties with Tehran with a China analyst. Good morning. Thank you for being with us.
Today's Thursday, March 5th. You're watching NTD Good Morning, and we're continuing with our coverage of Operation Epic Fury, the joint U.S.-Israel operation in Iran that's now entering day 6.
U.S. Central Command releasing footage highlighting the first 100 hours of Operation Epic Fury as the U.S. ramps up operations in Iran. The Pentagon says the most intense bombing is yet to come.
The effort to eliminate the Iranian regime's mobile missile launch capabilities continues. And Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is set to visit CENTCOM headquarters in Tampa, Florida later today.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon identifying the last 2 of the 6 soldiers that were killed in Operation Epic Fury.
All 6 Army Reserve soldiers were killed by an Iranian drone attack on a tactical operations center in Kuwait on Sunday.
The Department of War confirming the death of Major Jeffrey O'Brien of Indianola, Iowa. The department believes the 6th soldier to be Chief Warrant Officer Robert Marzan of Sacramento, California. A medical examiner will complete a positive identification.
And the White House says the U.S. will very soon gain complete control of Iranian airspace. That's
as it says Iran's retaliatory strikes are weakening by the day. Washington correspondent Mari Otsu has the details from the White House.
The momentum here in Washington is unmistakable, with both the Pentagon and the White House projecting rapid dominance over the skies in Iran. And building on that, war officials are also highlighting the U.S.-Israel partnership as a game changer. The War Secretary Pete Hegseth is touting it as, quote, a breath of fresh air, saying that the combined U.S. military and Israeli defense forces together are, quote, devastatingly capable force. The White House announcing the death of 49 senior Iranian regime officials and counting as strikes continue to dismantle key elements of the regime, and President Trump again reiterating 4 clear objectives for Operation Epic Fury. 1, to destroy the Iranian regime's deadly ballistic missile system. 2, to annihilate their navy. That's as the White House is announcing over the destruction of over 20 Iranian ships and their top submarine. 3, to ensure the regime's proxies cannot destabilize the region. And 4, to ensure that the Iranian regime can never obtain a nuclear weapon. And here's President Trump weighing in on how the operation is going. Take a look.
We're doing very well on the war front, to put it mildly, I would say. Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15. And we're going to continue to do well. We have the greatest military in the world by far, and that was a tremendous threat to us for many years. 47 years they've been killing our people, and they would have used it on us if we let them, if we waited any longer.
The Pentagon saying America is winning, quote, decisively, devastatingly, and without mercy, and that the U.S. and Israel will soon have complete control of Iranian skies.
I hope all the folks watching understand what uncontested airspace and complete control means. It means we will fly all day, all night, day and night, finding, fixing, and finishing the missiles and defense industrial base of the Iranian military, finding and fixing their leaders and their military leaders.
The Secretary of War saying an American submarine sank an Iranian warship with a torpedo in international waters, and the White House announcing a significant reduction in retaliatory strikes from the Iranian regime.
Quiet death. The first sinking of an enemy ship by a torpedo since World War II.
If you look at the Iranian ballistic missile launches, they're down 86% from day 1 levels. So while the United States military continues to increase its complete dominance over this rogue regime, they are weakening day by day.
The White House releasing a partial record of what it calls Iran's decades-long campaign against Americans, from the 1979 hostage crisis in Tehran to the 1983 Marine barracks bombing in Beirut. The list also cites the 1996 Khobar Towers attack, hundreds of U.S. troop deaths in Iraq linked to Iran-backed militias, and more recent rocket and drone strikes on U.S. forces in the region. And the Iranian regime has also been threatening to assassinate President Trump since 2020 in response to the killing of Soleimani. The Department of Justice bringing charges in an Iranian murder-for-hire plot to kill him in 2024.
Also, yesterday, the leader of the unit who attempted to assassinate President Trump has been hunted down and killed. Iran tried to kill President Trump, and President Trump got the last laugh.
And as some lawmakers are forcing a vote on a resolution aimed at limiting U.S. military action in Iran, the administration is slamming Democrats for prematurely undermining national security just days into a successful operation.
And in fact, they decided that in our system, they don't want a king-like figure being able to unilaterally decide to send American men and women to war.
Well, I've been through that movie before with the Democrats rooting against the country. I think it's pretty unprecedented and unfortunate that it would occur 4 days in to an operation. He's been privy to briefs that we've provided. He knows how effective this has been. He's being disingenuous.
The White House also accusing critics and the media of disingenuous reporting to manufacture contradictions while highlighting the Iranian regime's murderous intentions toward Americans.
And I would like the media to actually report on all of them, rather than just picking sound bites from one person in this administration and saying, oh, they're contradicting the other person. No, again, these decisions are not made in a vacuum. They are made by the president's feeling that Iran was going to strike the United States and our assets in the region, and he was not going to sit back and watch that happen. If the Iranian regime had their choice, they would kill every single person in this room. And you know you are being disingenuous.
The White House saying that it extends its condolences and prayers to the families and loved ones of those 6 U.S. service members killed in Operation Epic Fury. The White House also announcing that President Trump will be attending their dignified transfer. Back to you.
Thank you, Mari. And in the Middle East, Israel forces report launching multiple strikes against key Iranian headquarters in Tehran.
And also launching strikes on Hezbollah in Lebanon. Here's the latest.
The Israeli army says it identified missiles launched from Iran towards its territory, sirens sounding overnight across Jerusalem. Hours earlier, alerts were issued across Tel Aviv as reporters saw missile interceptions lighting the sky. The attacks come as Israel strikes Iran-backed Hezbollah terror targets in neighboring Lebanon. On Wednesday, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard launched a drone attack on an Amazon data center in Bahrain. That's according to an Iranian state-affiliated news agency. Amazon Web Services said earlier this week a drone strike impacted one of its facilities in Bahrain. The company says 2 of its facilities in the UAE were also damaged in strikes.
And joining us now for analysis on the Iran war is Stefano Rittendale. He's a former military intelligence specialist as well as the chief intelligence officer with Artorias. Thank you so much for joining us, Stefano, this morning. I want to really dig into these reports that the Kurds are establishing some type of organization to attempt military operations against the regime. If you could first just give some background on the Kurds, because my understanding is their population within Iran is actually the minority of them. And so I want to get an understanding of what's actually happening with the Kurds.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. So, as you said, the Kurdish population in Iran is one of the key minorities in the country, but they have a predominant presence along northwest Iran. And they've had decades in history of having conflict with the central government, even before the Islamic Republic, even during the Shah time. But during the Islamic Republic, we've actually seen multiple Kurdish groups have engaged in insurgencies against Iran, with a couple of the key ones being, for example, PJAK, which is one of the affiliates of the PKK, which is the main one that is fighting Turkey. We also have the Kamala Party, the Freedom Party of Kurdistan in Iran, and all these parties basically generally have a long history of fighting the Islamic Republic for the last couple of years, if not decades. What we're getting reports of is it looks like the United States is planning on arming them and using them as an offensive force. And some of them absolutely use their base of operations in Iraqi Kurdistan, which is the border region of Iranian Kurdistan. And a lot of these groups do have bases of operations, not only in Iran, but more importantly in Iraq and along the border of Iraq and Iran. And it looks like the United States is looking into, and if not outright arming and planning to use these Iranian Kurdish groups as one of the ground forces that they can use to conduct offensive operations inside of Iran and against the Islamic Republic.
Now, Stefano, I understand the benefit in that you're not putting U.S. boots on the ground and you're arming people who do have some skin in the game. I want to get an understanding of what the Persian people might view the Kurdish coming in with arms. What are some of the dynamics there?
Right. So I would say that it looks like the arming of the Kurds, when you're looking at the kind of the Iranian opposition from Iran, you do get a lot of them do support it, but you also get mixed feelings and concerns, especially because of that ethnic dynamic that is going on. Obviously, Iran is mostly ethnic Persian, but there's also ethnic minorities around that area, even some of them close to the Kurds. For example, the Azeris are also a significant minority inside of Iran, and they generally operate and are located at the same area as the Kurds. And then you also have the Arab minority as well that is very prevalent along the Iran-Iraq border too. So not only do you have to consider the aspect of the Persians, but you also have to consider other minorities that might be active in the region, how they might interpret this. That, I think, is one of the key risks about this. Does the Islamic Republic manage to leverage this, that the fact that this is a minority-based group that is receiving support by the United States and Israel while airstrikes are going on, do they leverage this as an attempt to try to rally around the flag and use it as a propaganda to say, because these are Kurdish minorities who generally have a history of fighting the central government for an independent Kurdistan, do they use this from a nationalism perspective to say, look, the Kurds are here to break up Iran, to break up Persia, to break up the Islamic Republic. We need to rally around our flag to fight against them. And I think that's the main concern. But at the same time, historically, the Kurdish groups have also played a very predominant role within the larger opposition groups against the Islamic Republic. And even just as we saw the protests in January, where tens of thousands of protesters were killed, a lot of those protests also happened inside of Kurdistan regions. And we also got reports of Kurdish militant activity during that time frame. And it really didn't have an impact whatsoever at all, or if anything, it galvanized the protesters. So there are risks, but I think a lot of this also has a lot of potential to really challenge the Islamic Republic and maybe bring it down overall, as President Trump stated his goal is.
Yes, and to join us in this conversation with Stefano and myself, we're going to bring in Amir Avivi. He's a retired brigadier general with the IDF. Thank you for joining us in this conversation, Amir. We're starting with the Kurds, but before I get your view on that, I do want to ask what's happening right now on the ground in Israel. We saw yesterday from the Pentagon, they said 86% decline in ballistic missile fires from Iran since the start of the war. But as we saw also that there were a fair amount of air raid sirens in Israel. So what are you seeing there?
So basically, Israel at the moment is being shot from Iran and from Lebanon. So this is why there are many sirens. Most of the events are on the Lebanese borders, and many of them are drones and occasionally some rockets. Hezbollah has also shot Tel Aviv. They're shooting Tel Aviv and Haifa. But overall, we definitely see a continuous decline in the shooting of ballistic missiles from Iran. The quantity is going down, and we are hearing also from the IDF that they are attacking around-the-clock ballistic missile sites and launcher together with the U.S. The U.S. is attacking with strategic bombers, with the B-52, B-1, B-2, also these sites. And I think it's just a matter of time until we'll see Israel and the U.S. really able to suppress almost entirely the ability of Iran to endanger Israel and the region, attacking both the ballistic missile capabilities and the drones. This is a big priority. Both the U.S. and Israel want to make sure that Iran cannot pose a threat as they are taking complete control of the Iranian skies and attacking all these thousands and thousands of targets that they have planned for months and months. There is a very, very detailed plan that both armies are executing.
And Amir, Stefano was explaining to me the role that the Kurds might play. I want to understand your view as to what could be the thing that causes the tipping point, either where there's just no fighting force left from the regime or those in the rank and file put their arms down. What forces or coalescence might need to happen? Do the Kurds play an important role in your view?
Well, I think that the plan is first to really destroy the regime's oppressing forces, the Revolutionary Guards, the Basij forces that are being attacked around the clock. And I think there will be a moment where Israel and the U.S. will manage to hit the regime to such an extent that they will be able to say to the people of Iran, this is your moment, go out to the streets, take back your country, and this time not have the terrible result we saw a month and a half ago when tens of thousands of Iranians were killed. We hear, parts of the Kurds that are organizing. I hear also about other minorities, the Arab minorities, the Ahwazis who are saying they will fight. Obviously, there is some kind of destabilization inside Iran, but I believe that really the big issue is not just one minority or another. It's really overall the people of Iran rising and going to the streets and fighting for their land. The U.S. and Israel now are careful not to call them too early and make sure that really this regime is destroyed almost entirely. So we have time. The fight has been going on not even a week. We just started. It's just the beginning. And I would assume that at a certain point, maybe 2 weeks from now, a week from now, a moment will come where both countries will feel that this is the right moment to call the people to the streets.
And Stefano, as we begin to finish up, I just want to get your view on what Amir was sharing, what that timing and that tipping point could look like, and how the Kurds and other forces might play a role in that.
Right, I think you brought up an excellent point that right now, clearly the U.S. and Israeli airstrikes are targeting the primary aspects. We saw this during the Secretary of War's press conference, that the focus continues to kind of be the air defense assets and the ballistic missile forces. So the air defense being destroyed enables freedom of maneuver inside of Iranian airspace, and then the ballistic missiles and the drone launchers to prevent their ability to kind of strike back at the U.S. and at the Gulf and at Israel. But subsequently, we're already seeing an increase of target strike, not only against IRGC and Basij installations, we're also seeing them against police station and even the regular Iranian military, specifically the Aritesh. Those are clearly designed to kind of limit the ability of Iran to continue its internal stability. And I think the Kurdish component, though, is probably a piece of the puzzle and not the main effort in the sense of trying to bring back down the Islamic Republic, because I think there is still an intent by the administration to encourage Iranians to go out into the street and to protest, as we saw last month. And I think the goal is basically to foment so much problem sets and so many different chaos for the Islamic Republic that they're not able to address it all at once. And then that might be the tipping point for some of these offensive and protests to kind of take to the streets and ideally bring down the Islamic Republic.
Well, we're watching by the hour with great interest. Appreciate both of your analysis. Stefano Rittendale, Amir Avivi, thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much.
20% of the world's oil and gas shipments are in a holding pattern at the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf. It's a choke point as narrow as 21 miles, and it separates Iran from Oman. Tankers are lined up on both sides. They're awaiting instructions on if and when to pass, as the Iranian regime has declared the waterways closed. However, President Trump is making moves to open it back up. Joining us now is Gerard Flitti. He's a Middle East affairs analyst and an attorney specializing in international law. Gerard, thanks for joining us. Ships aren't technically prevented from passing through, so why aren't there any movements of the oil and gas?
They're not prevented from passing through, but there's a very real danger to those ships and the people on them from Iran attacking them, whether through ground to sea missiles or interdiction at sea. Iran has been very reckless in its actions in shooting missiles and rockets and firing drones at a number of regional countries. So there's a very real concern that if they pass through that narrow opening, Iran has threatened that it will take action against those ships.
And what has Trump's response been?
Trump's response has been twofold. One is to put what's left of the Iranian Navy on the bottom of the Gulf, so to diminish the capacity of the Iranian Navy to wage war against those vessels. But also now he will begin escorting U.S. Warships will begin escorting tankers through the straits in order for them to resume their normal rounds and their transit without fear of interdiction by the Iranians.
Now, I understand the shipping industry has certain elements to it that are unique to it, particularly because of the vast amounts of cargo on these ships, as well as the potential for environmental damage should one of them be struck and the liability associated with it, that insurance plays a very key role in this industry, maybe relative to other industries. Can you break that down, in particular, what's the company Lloyd's out of London and their role in all of this?
Well, it absolutely is. And Lloyd's is the world's biggest insurer and reinsurer, providing umbrella coverage above the millions of dollars and the hundreds of millions of dollars for a lot of these vessels and their transit. And ultimately, this also does come down to an insurance decision, because insurance companies, including Lloyd's, have said that they will not underwrite coverage for these ships as they transit because of the risk of war, because there are hostilities in the region, which increases the chances that there will be a sinking of a ship that will cause an environmental catastrophe that will cost hundreds of millions of dollars to clean up or damages. So the lack of underwriting by insurance companies is one of the main reasons why these vessels are not sailing through the straits, which is something that President Trump is also working on within the United States to provide insurance coverage or provide waivers so that these ships can move.
Now, 20% of the world's oil and gas goes through that strait. About almost 70% of it could not be rerouted. And if it was to be rerouted, it would be very timely and expensive as well. So really the best chance to get that moving and to keep the commodities prices stabilized, which are creeping up, is to get that opened. Can you explain a little bit deeper Trump's move to put the U.S. in that central role as insurer, and what effect that might have on the shipping industry at large?
Well, the effect that it should have on the shipping industry is to give them confidence that they can, both with American gunships escorting them and with this insurance coverage proposed by the Trump administration, that they can resume business as usual within days or hours, not weeks, so that there is not a long-term disruption of the oil supply and that there is not a long-term pressure on commodities pricing. So I think that the combination of Trump's actions are meant to get this straight, get that 20% of oil back to market sooner rather than later. And we're already seeing significant progress being reported in the war itself, meaning that Iran is launching fewer missiles. We seem to be degrading their military capabilities at a very rapid rate. So this is not going to be a long-term closure or a long-term impediment between what President Trump is doing to specifically get oil back to market and the military actions taking place. This looks to be a matter of days or maybe a week or so, not months, not an extended period of shortage.
Now, unlike industries like AI and technology, where they're very agile, these shipping enterprises have been kind of doing things the same way for decades, if not generations. My understanding is that none of them have formally taken Trump's offer on a different insurance provider and have actively start moving ships. What do you think it will take to get those ships to go? Does it, the first one kind of start the domino effect, or what will we need to see in order for the oil to start flowing?
I think it does. I think there's usually, when you have a new and unusual circumstance, a war like this, there is oftentimes you need to wait for the first person to take up an opportunity and show that it's safe and that it's a possibility. But I think it also will come down to economic pressure on these companies from their customers who want to see the oil flowing quicker and who are perhaps appeased by the Trump administration's measures, thinking that they are sufficient. So ultimately, I think that what we will see in the coming days is we will see companies starting to take up the president. I think that these companies will be flag carriers of countries that America has good relations with, and this will encourage other shipping companies to follow suit.
Now, Starmer's support for Trump and the action in Iran hasn't been extremely positive or negative, kind of lukewarm somewhere in the middle. This whole industry is run out of London, the reinsurance business for shipping. Is that an attractive industry that the U.S. has any interest in trying to parlay, or is this just a very situational thing and you think business would go back to normal once this sort of action is in the rearview mirror?
It is a largely situational place that we're in. Lloyd's especially is so old and so big and so well established that we do not have an equivalent company anywhere else for what it does, although we certainly have competitors and we have groups of smaller companies that usually band together to provide that excess coverage, that umbrella coverage, or underwrite large policies. So this may be an opportunity for the American market, for insurance companies to expand their coverage of what other companies like Lloyd's are are doing internationally.
And Gerard, just as we finish up, I'd just like to get your view as to what might be that tipping point that would allow for regime change. We saw there's some activity maybe with the Kurds, but ultimately, what will give the people confidence to essentially, take control of their government?
I think in the last 24 hours, we've seen more airstrikes on the facilities of the Basij, the militias, the secret police, not just in Tehran, but in other major cities in Iraq. These are the people, the secret police are the ones who are responsible for oppressing the Iranian people, for stopping revolutions, for stopping them, shooting people who go out on the streets to protest. So as we're shifting now from targeting missile silos, once we're confident that they no longer have ballistics to fire at America, Israel, and our allies in the Gulf, we will be switching targeting more and more towards these militias. And with them gone or them significantly reduced, we will more likely see people taking to the streets to take back their governments.
Gerard Fetterman, thank you so much for your analysis.
Thank you.
That's right. And civilians on the ground there scrambling to leave the Middle East as the war ramps up there.
That's right. Evacuation flights carrying thousands of passengers out of the region.
Now, the State Department is saying the first U.S. evacuation flight departed yesterday without giving any more details at this point.
Yeah, Israel says it will begin reopening its main international airport today for incoming flights.
Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says U.S. officials are now directing citizens overseas to a 24-hour hotline and the State Department's Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. Leavitt says the administration has identified Americans requesting assistance and is in direct contact with them. The State Department says over 17,000 Americans have already returned from the region, and that includes about 8,500 on Tuesday alone. Several U.S. embassies remain closed as Iranian attacks and proxy strikes continue across parts of the Middle East, and we'll be watching that closely.
And as you can see, we're looking at a live view over Beirut. We just heard from Amir Avivi that there are operations against Hezbollah in the region where they're firing from Lebanon into Israel. When we come back, senators reject a Democrat push to limit President Trump's military authority in Iran. Now Republicans pushing to fund the DHS amid a 19-day stalemate.
And how could the rising tensions in Iran create new risks for Beijing? We'll be breaking down China's deep ties with Tehran with a China analyst after this. Senators rejecting a push from Democrats to limit President Trump's military authority amid ongoing operations in Iran. Now, Republicans are citing the war as a pressing reason to end a stalemate over DHS funding. NTD's Melina Weisskopf joins us live for more. Good morning, Melina. First, tell us about the War Powers Act and where the effort stands there.
So like you mentioned, Steph, senators voted last evening on a resolution that would have cut short ongoing military operations in Iran. All Republicans in that vote, except Senator Rand Paul, rejected the Democrat measure. And the only Democrat to vote with Republicans was once again Senator John Fetterman, as expected. Listen to this.
I think the president is acting in the best interest of the nation and our national security interests by ensuring that he's protecting Americans and American bases and installations in that region.
Why we all can agree that the world is better, safer, and it's more just, and now could be real peace. Because if you have say we can never allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon, well, now that's happened, and now they can't.
Though it failed in the Senate, a similar vote is expected to be forced in the House, and the level of support from either side of the aisle is unclear, but we do expect a select few Democrats at least to reject it, like Congressman Greg Landsman of Ohio, who said he supports Trump's Operation Epic Fury. And at least one Republican in the House, Congressman Thomas Massie, will also join Democrats to oppose Trump's Iran action. Steph.
Okay, so let's talk about the ongoing stalemate now over the funding for the Department of Homeland Security, because Republicans are holding another vote today in the House. Has support changed since DHS funding was first put on hold?
Well, that's what Republicans are hoping for. Many Republicans have cited the war in the Middle East as a pressing reason for why more Democrats should come around and support the DHS funding, though many Democrats aren't buying it. Listen to House Speaker Mike Johnson.
If we're being wise, now is the time to be vigilant at home and to ensure that all of our doors are locked, so to speak. Obviously, everyone understands that it's a heightened threat environment. Global tensions are high, threats are constantly evolving, and America's adversaries are watching for any sign of weakness on our part. We cannot show.
So at least among Democrat House leadership, they're still insisting on changes to ICE policy in exchange for Democrat votes to fund the DHS. But today's House vote will actually show whether or not the war in the Middle East has moved the needle at all on the Democrat side. But, Steph, I should note that even though it is likely to pass the House, regardless of where House Democrats stand on this, Senate Democrats are really the key to moving this forward, since we know there needs to be at least 7 Democrats in the Senate for this to even make it to the president's desk. Steph.
And we'll be looking forward to your updates. Thank you so much, NTD congressional correspondent Melina Weisskopf.
Yeah, the margins are quite narrow in both the House and the Senate, so just amplifying the drama leading up to the upcoming midterms.
Never know what it's going to turn into. All right, next, Iran is dragging NATO deeper into the conflict there. Tehran is sending a ballistic missile toward NATO airspace, and NATO air defense systems successfully shooting it down.
NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has how Iran is involving more and more countries into the war.
The war in the Middle East is rapidly widening. Tehran's strategy is to sow chaos and set the region on fire.
The European Union criticizing Iran for attacking countries all across the Middle East and in some cases even in Europe. On Wednesday, NATO air defense systems in Turkey shooting down an incoming Iranian missile. Video shows debris of the missile on Turkish soil. The EU's foreign policy chief saying Iran is creating its own demise.
By indiscriminately attacking its neighbors, the regime is making a strong case for its own demise.
And the president of Turkey saying he's already speaking with NATO allies to make necessary interventions.
We are giving warnings in the clearest way possible for similar incidents not to occur again.
And Turkey isn't the only NATO member getting more involved in the conflict. The United Kingdom, France and Greece are sending warships to the Mediterranean Sea. This after Iran attacked a British military base in Cyprus. Footage shows 2 Greek warships already arriving in Cyprus on Wednesday. The UK's ship is set to depart next week, carrying helicopters with drone defense technology. But British Prime Minister Keir Starmer warning of hasty decision-making at this time.
We need to act, therefore, with clarity, with purpose, and with a cool head.
Starmer says deploying the ship to Cyprus and allowing the US to use British bases will help protect UK citizens from incoming Iranian attacks.
That is the agreement that we've reached with the United States to protect our nationals.
NATO's Article 5 states that an attack on one is an attack on all, potentially dragging the entire alliance into a war. But Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says he doesn't think Iran's attacks so far could trigger NATO's Article 5. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
Thanks to Arian for that report. And how could the war in Iran create new risks for Beijing? Joining us now to break down China's deep ties with Tehran is China analyst and YouTuber David Zhang. He's host of David on China. David, thanks for joining us this morning. Fundamentally, what is China's interest in Iran?
It's 3 levels. First, you have strategic level, which is to create this permanent proxy, a distraction that can force some of the U.S. efforts into the Middle East. And this was the lesson that they really learned from the war on terror. And so now removing that permanent distractor in the Middle East, or attempting to, is something very beneficial. And the second level is the soft power, right? You have phrases like the community of common destiny, supposedly China's alternative global or international order, this thing that you can rely on China or the CCP for. And then you also have the concrete strategic partnerships like with Iran through oil or the Belt and Road Initiative, which permanently sets the Chinese footprint into the region as, again, the alternative to the United States.
Now, David, there's a new report and it says China has set its economic growth target below 5%, and that's the first time in more than 3 decades. How significant is that, and can you break that down for us, what that means?
Yeah, frankly, I don't think China ever really hit the 5% in recent years, especially after COVID. But the 5% for the CCP is always an input number. It is the direction given from above to indicate what those productions should be at the end of the year. With less than 5%, you're really seeing an indication that it's harder, or is much harder to hold even a 0.5 percentage dip in the yearly GDP number. So that tells you a lot about the relative comparison if you compare year over year to sort of some of the information that we used to be able to get through things like unemployment record numbers, through just the manufacturing, export data, and whatnot. Obviously, we can't really trust the Chinese data to its real numbers, but it still gives us this reference to start off where 2026 it seems to be a downturn dip. Obviously, China has a lot of long-term problems with its population decline, aging population, and the overall trend of consumerism still not basically haven't recovered since 2020. I do think that this is somehow a slightly more realistic, but again, you can't trust these numbers, take on the actual GDP.
And David, the Pentagon says Russia and China not involved in the decision-making process surrounding the U.S. and Israel strike on Iran. So what does that tell us about the balance of power and China's role or its limited role in these global security decisions?
Yeah, look, I think it's very interesting because the Pentagon says they're not included in the decision making. That just tells us the American foreign policy today is not considering what others around the world is thinking of. It is just doing whatever the U.S. is interested in doing. And this really calls into, the discussion that people used to have about U.S. credibility, reliability on its partners and allies in regions. But now everyone's looking at the opposite, right? China's credibility is being called into position. But this, both things can be true. The effects of the strikes on Iran is that it directly impacts China's reach and influence around the world. And so I think both things can be true at the same time, that you're not deciding on things based on what China and Russia thinks, but you can also have consequences that affect those countries across the world.
And we're seeing, the superiority of U.S. and Israeli technology in military exercises. We saw the failure of Chinese equipment in Venezuela. They had those anti-aircraft systems supplied by China, and they basically failed. So how should we assess China's actual military capabilities? Specifically, should anything brew up again with Taiwan?
I do think right now, at the moment, we can really assess that the Chinese technology, even its geolocation system, the Beidou system included, they're not as effective as they are on paper. And I think for a while, the world thought that Chinese technology was going to be the replacement of the tried and true American or Western brands. But I think today, through real life examples, we have now two, Venezuela, and you mentioned Iran now as well. So I think it gives us, real life data, real life track records, resumes speak much louder than paper talks. And I really do think the talk of a CCP paper tiger is something that we should actually look into.
We appreciate your analysis this morning. Very interesting how China and Russia, circling on the outsides, are on the sides of this conflict with Iran. Appreciate it. David Zhang.
Thank you.
Yeah, but this was an interesting final point that David made about the equipment that China is able to supply to Iran, being so weak. Not only that, though, the regime really hasn't stepped up and helped its friend in the Middle East. So as many analysts are noting, that's also a sign of weakness that's loud and clear for many of China's friends around the world, that it's not reliable.
Just a strongly worded statement, right? But no actual show of anything significant outside of putting out a press release. So. Yep. And we'll have some more.
That's on its way.
Yeah, we'll have some more expert analysis as the Iran war develops. We'll be answering questions, what you want to know. Stay with us for that.
Welcome back. And the U.S.'s allies are now weighing in more on the war with Iran.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney speaking alongside his Australian counterpart, Anthony Albanese.
One can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our ally.
I think the world wants to see a de-escalation and wants to
see Iran cease to spread the destinations of its attacks.
Canada and Australia presented a united front today as to what's described as the middle powers. The leaders of both nations stressing a need for de-escalation, but also an end to Iran's nuclear weapons program.
Carney is on a multi-leg trip across the Asia-Pacific region, also taking in Japan and India. His stop in Australia included the first address to Australia's parliament by a Canadian leader going back to 2007.
Spain, meanwhile, has rejected a statement from the White House saying it would cooperate with U.S. forces. The country's foreign minister saying, quote, the position of the Spanish government regarding the war in the Middle East, the bombing of Iran, and the use of our bases has not changed one iota.
His statement coming after White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt yesterday said it was her understanding Madrid had agreed to cooperate with the U.S. military. President Trump on Tuesday threatened to cut off all trade with Spain after the country refused to allow the U.S. to use its bases to support the war in Iran.
And continuing with our coverage of the Iran war, we welcome David Wormser, analyst for Middle East Affairs at the Center for Security Policy.
Thank you.
Good to have you with us, David. Good morning. The Pentagon yesterday said the number of Iran's attacks has plunged as the U.S. prepares deeper strikes, and U.S. forces have also hit or sunk more than 20 ships. What does that say about Iran's missile stockpile, and how long do you see this war lasting at this point?
Well, the missile stockpile, I think they now are kind of trapped. They have their missiles, those 1,000, 2,000, or 2,500 missiles originally that they had them stored in mountains, which is safe to store from American attacks. But the problem is you have to get them out of the mountains and shoot them in order to hit the target. A missile without a missile launcher is essentially like a bullet without a gun. It doesn't really do anything. So the Israelis, the Americans have been focusing on the launchers. The launchers have been decimated in the old Roman term, which means 9 out of 10 are gone. So you're seeing a fairly dramatic drop in the ability to send missiles. That doesn't mean the Iranians don't have missiles still in those tunnels, but they are losing their ability to shoot them. And you're seeing that effect. Or a lot less attacks today. And those that are with fewer missiles. That said, you're seeing the geographic area of what Iran is striking expanding. The airport in Azerbaijan has been hit, which is yet the 12th country that Iran has struck out at.
Now, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says America is winning and that the U.S. and Israel will soon gain control of Iranian airspace. In your assessment, does the current Iranian regime stand a chance of surviving this kind of force?
Well, there's always a chance, but I think it's a fairly grim and slim chance. The air, as you said, the air is turning now over to full control to the Americans and Israelis, which means that they can now also loiter and in real-time attack concentrations of IRGC forces that go after demonstrators. We're not quite at that stage yet, where the United States and Israel are calling on the demonstrators to take back to the streets. We're still in the phase where they're told to stay home while we get the work done. But we're getting there. And when that phase happens, it's quite possible the Iranian regime simply won't have the power anymore to protect its core assets and to survive. The second thing is we're seeing stuff in the north near Azerbaijan and in the northeast, west, near the Kurdish areas of Iraq that suggests that there is now a structure of corridors opening up for dissidents and weapons to start flowing in.
So what kind of future does Operation Epic Fury leave for the people of Iran and the nation?
Well, I think the legacy of it, well, not the legacy, but the next phases of it will be a takedown, a final sort of erasing of all the capabilities that Iran has to reach out and hurt nations far away through missiles and through terrorism and so forth. As far as what goes on inside Iran, the idea here seems to be to eliminate the power of the government to defend itself, to suppress the population like they did a month ago when they, in order to survive, just killed 30, 40,000 people in 1 or 2 nights. So the United States and Israel are taking down those structures. So I think what you're going to see is a few more days of cleaning out of these weapon systems that are right now causing international problems, whether it's in the Gulf or Israel with the missiles. And then you're going to start seeing the stuff turn to destabilization of the regime. And that will take a few weeks. And then the Iranian people, I think, will have a shot at taking over their government with limited or sporadic ability by the government to defend itself. And then it's an Iranian question then.
Yeah, and just looking at the regime as it is now, what kind of support does it have in Iran, and what percentage of Iranians do you think actually support the regime right now?
Well, I think that, first of all, when we look back a month, they really relied on foreign forces, Afghanis, Iraqi militias, and so forth, to suppress the population of Iran. They couldn't count on all the Iranian, even their own IRGC, they couldn't count on it. And the Iraqi militias have been hit, and they've been hit hard, both by the United States and Israel in the last few days. And also they may start putting their finger in the wind and running away because ultimately they're not Iranians at all. So one, that structure may be gone, but as far as Iranians go, there's Iranians that don't necessarily love or support the government but are dependent on it. A lot of the economy depends on this IRGC control of it and so forth. It's an intertwined system. But I would really put it at very narrow, and most people are beginning to tilt over, even in that narrow group of people are beginning to tilt over and think they have a better shot in the long term at trying to make their peace with what may come rather than stick with what is. So I think you're talking a very small group of people are really now still going to try to hold on.
Rapid developments in the air, in the sea, and right there on the ground in people's hearts and minds. Thank you so much, David Wormser.
Thank you.
And joining us now for more analysis on the Iran war is Michael Pregent. He's a Middle East expert and former intelligence officer. Thanks for joining, Michael. Appreciate it. What are you seeing and taking note of most recently, say in the last 24 hours of the conflict?
Thanks for having me. My main focus is looking at what the IRGC can do, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. What can it do with its drones? We've seen them be able to effectively strike our embassies and oil and gas infrastructure in the region. But I'm looking at what are they going to do with their proxy forces in Iraq. We've seen threats against the U.S. Embassy there. We've seen what Lebanon's trying to do. Israel is degrading their capabilities at the same time as conducting attacks inside of Iran. I'm looking for this to be the operation, Epic Fury, that doesn't make us have to go back to Iran again to hit their nuclear program, their ballistic missiles, and their leadership. So far, day 6, all the targets are being hit. We have control of the skies. Because we have control of the skies, we have the ability now to use other bombs that don't require standoff distance, meaning these gravity bombs that everybody's talking about. They're equipped with JDAMs, they're precision strikes, they hit the target, and they're used against military targets. So I'm looking at to see whether or not this is continuing to be successful. It is, but what's the end game, right? I've been saying the day after the regime is a nice problem to have, because we'll be able to look at this regime and try to pick a horse in the race. We're still looking to see what horses are in the race at this time.
And when you speak about horses in the race, I'd like to get your assessment of the potential Kurdish involvement. Iranian Kurds make up a relatively small proportion of the total Kurdish population. They are, of course, somewhat stateless. But how do you view potentially arming them, the CIA's involvement?
Well, see, the Kurds would be limited. So it'd be in northern Iraq. That's where northern Iran and northern Iraq. I've been an advisor with the Kurdish forces in Iraq against Iran's militias and Al-Qaeda. also an advisor during the ISIS campaign. We trust the Kurds. If we do partner with the Kurds in northern Iran, if Israel partners with the Kurds, they have a good relationship as well. It will mean that we will be able to have forward operating bases in northern Iran to be able to conduct, attacks without having to fly across countries to do so. As far as the Kurds taking over the government or taking over Iran, that's not what this is. This is about control of territory in the north, to be able to establish bases with a trusted ally that we've used in Iraq, that we've used in Syria, and now is begging to be used in northern Iran.
And one stat that was quite eye-opening from the Pentagon briefing yesterday was that 86% of the missile launching capabilities were taken off. Have you seen that trend continue over the last 24 hours, or is there any bit of Iranian resurgence in the last 24 hours?
So the degradation in the ballistic missiles and the rockets, you can see it decrease every day, and it's going down, every day. The drones are still the biggest concern. They take the least amount of time to set up. Individual strikes can take 10 to 20 minutes to set up. But if you have a salvo or what we call a swarm when it comes to drones, that could be an hour to 2 hours. And what that allows is U.S. and Israeli pilots and now coalition pilots from the Gulf region to be able to strike the setup. It's basically a truck that has a launcher. The back of the truck goes up. It has 5 drones in the back, and it fires at a predetermined target. And if they can mass those together, they can have a swarming effect. That's the biggest threat right now. The drones. The ballistic missiles are going down. The rockets are going down. The leadership's going down. The nuclear program has been degraded. It's the drones, and that's the easiest weapon to use with the most effect. We've seen what they've been able to do to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE.
And we understand that those drones have also been supplied to Russia and that they are quite advanced. Yes. What are the opportunities to defend against them?
Well, the thing is, they have a 30% fail rate just on their own. From takeoff, they crash. 30% of them don't make it to the target. 80% of them don't make it to the target if there's any sort of air defense capabilities in place, meaning this is something you have to shoot down with machine guns or Apaches. You can use expensive missiles to shoot them down, but you don't want to do that. The Ukrainians have taught us a technique. They basically put a 14.5 millimeter anti-aircraft gun in the back of a pickup truck, or a dishka is what they call it, and they listen for the lawnmower sound. These drones are slow. They sound like a lawnmower, and then they just wait for it, and then they just hit it with machine gun fire. They've been very successful. And Zelensky has actually offered to help defend against the Shahed drones because the Ukrainians probably have the most experience at this point.
Very interesting analysis there of that lawnmower sound. Now, Michael, just in our last 30 seconds as we finish up, do you have any sense for what a tipping point might look like in terms of regime change?
Well, we're degrading the leadership, right? So the candidates now are becoming less and less popular. And I keep hearing that the Supreme Leader's son will be the next Supreme Leader, but I heard he was dead 4 days ago. So we need proof of life. We need to find out what's going on. A tipping point for regime change will be a significant IRGC commander defecting and starting to work with the U.S. forces and the IDF Air Force in the air. That would be the tipping point.
Very interesting. You would hope that our CIA has the ability to sweeten the pot and make something like that happen. Appreciate you sharing your analysis with us. Michael Pregent, thank you.
Well, thanks for having me this morning. Thank you.
And right now we're taking a look at Israel and Tel Aviv. They're defending against incoming fire from Hezbollah, going to their bomb shelters periodically. We've heard some analysis earlier today. And coming up, tech giants at the White House, they pledge to cover the costs of powering their own AI data centers, aiming to protect consumers from rising electricity bills.
Also, Montana Senator Steve Daines announcing he's retiring just minutes before the filing deadline. Those stories and more ahead. Welcome back. Tech giants at the White House. President Trump meets with leaders of major technology companies.
Google, Meta, XAI, and others formalizing a pledge aimed at protecting consumers from rising electricity costs. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the key takeaways.
Major technology companies, along with several artificial intelligence firms, signing an agreement committing to pay for additional electricity generation needed to power their data centers. The pledge aiming to address concerns that the rapid growth of energy-hungry data centers is pushing up electricity prices for households and small businesses.
Here, under this new agreement, big tech companies are committing to fully cover the cost of increased electricity production required for AI data centers.
The so-called Ratepayer Protection Pledge was first announced by President Trump during his State of the Union address. It comes as communities and state lawmakers step up scrutiny of the rapid expansion of data centers across the country. Data centers consume massive amounts of electricity to power server racks and cooling systems, especially as companies race to develop artificial intelligence technologies.
They need some PR help because people think that if a data center goes in, their electricity prices are going to go up, and that's not happening. It's not going to happen. And for the areas where it did happen, it won't happen anymore.
The pledge includes a commitment from major tech companies to secure the electricity needed to power their data centers. That could come from building new power plants or expanding the output of existing ones.
Our country has had very big transformational movements before, whether it was coming together, World War II, or the Industrial Revolution. But this is different. The next 3 years, in many ways, sir, are the whole game.
To protect American ratepayers, we're committed not only to pay for 100% of the energy we use, but very importantly, the infrastructure to support that growth, whether or not we end up using that energy.
Because of your work on this issue, I'm confident that we will win the race with AI with China and succeed in delivering inexpensive, abundant electricity for the American people.
You know, it's been remarkable to watch this transformational moment and you positioning America to lead.
The agreement also calls for the companies to help fund upgrades to power transmission systems and to negotiate special electricity rate arrangements with local utilities.
They'll invest in the local communities where they build and operate, provide workforce development and jobs for skilled Americans like those with us today. We have great skilled people. Electricians, engineers, HVAC technicians.
With data center electricity usage expected to triple by 2035, the move could be coming just in the nick of time. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz testifies before the House Oversight Committee on reports of widespread fraud in federally funded programs in the state. NTD's David Lamb reports.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz testifying before the House Oversight Committee after fraudsters allegedly laundered and stole $9 billion in taxpayer funds through social programs in the state.
In January, the first hearing of this series, we heard from Minnesota state representatives who made clear this fraud was not hidden. It was known, documented, and repeatedly brought to the attention of state leadership.
We're not going to shut down programs that have things that are going well in it, and we need to find that proper balance. And I've acknowledged that every year we're putting things in place. And Inspector
Governor Walz, you did not do your job. You did not do your job.
Fraudsters exploited funds meant to feed children, support autistic children, provide health care to Medicaid recipients, and house low-income and disabled Americans. During the hearing, Democratic lawmakers brought up the scale of the federal investigation as well as the actions of federal agents in Minnesota.
The truth is that Donald Trump and Republicans have cut billions of dollars from health care and food assistance.
On January 7th, state lawmakers testified that both Tim Walz and Keith Ellison didn't properly address the widespread fraud.
Since 2019, our Charities Division has resolved over 50 investigations and dissolved 17 sham nonprofits.
According to the committee, whistleblowers who raised concerns have experienced retaliation. Minnesota has been under scrutiny over reports of Medicaid fraud, including a $300 million pandemic fraud case involving nonprofit organization Feeding Our Future. David Lamb, NTD News.
And thanks to David for that report. Montana Senator Steve Daines is exiting the 2026 race. He announced he will not seek re-election just minutes before yesterday's filing deadline.
I'm also very thankful to have served alongside President Trump and my colleagues in the Senate. Together, we built a conservative majority on the Supreme Court. We spearheaded Republican control of the U.S. Senate. We delivered the largest tax cut in U.S. history. We unleashed American energy dominance and secured our southern border. We also enacted the bipartisan Great American Outdoors Act, the most significant conservation achievement in half a century.
The Republican senator was widely expected to win a third term in the state President Trump carried by nearly 20 points back in 2024. He previously served 2 terms in the House before he joined the Senate. Daines thanked his wife Cindy and said the couple is looking forward to spending more time in Montana with their 7 grandchildren. Republicans now face a competitive primary in Montana on June 2nd. U.S. Attorney Kurt Alme quickly entered the race, already endorsed by President Trump. 3 Democrats have also declared their campaigns for the Senate seat. And we're going to go to a quick break. We'll be right back with more breaking news. Stay with us.